is defining immune systems and impact evaluation studies, including those with a centered and mixed methods approach. He also specializes in economics, finance, and data analytics. This includes a CFA designation from ICFAI, and doctorate in economics from CCS University, and MS in government analytics from Johns Hopkins University. He has spent approximately 16 years in full academia teaching various courses relating to finance, economics, strategy, and business research methods. For the past couple of years, her shift towards teaching interests have been development economics, public policy, econometrics, and monitoring and evaluation. Presently working as director, monitoring evaluation learning in Samsida. In parallel, also advising and consulting with organizations on the theory of change, research strategy, survey instruments, and impact analysis. Almost 9 years of experience in social sector working across multiple clients, which have included mobile process, BBC Media Action, Booms, and NIFI, uh, Child Fund International, and others. She volunteers actively and
Thank you, Dr. Sunil. I think that's good enough. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. How's everybody? Saturday evening. Studying on Saturday evening, always difficult. Okay. So I just before we start today, I'll take a little bit of an introductory session before it kind of gets very technical. But just one sentence in terms of what is it that you expect out of this program. Anybody would like to go? Anybody would like to say? I mean, what is the expectation? What are you looking forward when you are doing this course on statistics?
I feel with the research classes, I will learn the basics and will find how I'm supposed to do research and what are the pitfalls and how to identify the problem and how to like work on that with
Okay.
research classes.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, relevant research question. Great, great. Public health interventions. Excellent. Anybody else would like to say something? Okay. So I have around 8 to 9 sessions with you, and as far as the syllabus is concerned, right from the introduction to research, we are hoping that we go up to at least logistic regression, okay, which is in terms of taking dummy variables and doing some sort of regression in it. Okay, so initial classes, a little bit of theory, but as we go along, we try and do a little bit of a experimental in terms of looking at actual data and then doing the analysis. But 1 or 2 sessions, it will be morely theory. Okay, I try and make it very simple. If it gets too technical, then please let me know. Right? If you feel that it's little going a little too much, then please let me know, and then we'll try and reduce the complexity. For this particular session, I have just tried to kind of take you through the journey of research in terms of some definitions, in terms of things that you need to know, like what is a variable, what is sampling, what is research design, what is a hypothesis, what are data collection methods, what are scales, what is measurement, right? So whenever you are doing research, these are the kind of building blocks. Okay, so don't worry about there are a lot of slides, but don't get worried. Okay, so we'll just focus on the basics. Okay, I'm happy to share with you the slides, not a problem at all. Okay, but let's just focus on the basics, and the moment there is a question, please let me know. Okay, use of any open access statistical instead of SPSS. So I typically use Stata, which is obviously not open access. Okay, but as long as you understand the logic of it and understand how it is done, the commands can be done in any open access, which is including R and Python, right? So usually for statistics it is R which is used. Okay, but since we are used to Stata, right? But as long as you understand the logic, I'm sure you'll be able to pick up everything. But let's see how it goes. If it needs be, then we'll see. We'll try and do some couple of sessions on R if it's really required at the back end. But otherwise, for demonstrations, I will be using more of Stata. Okay, and I will try and ensure that the methodology is really clear, right? It's important that we understand what we are trying to do and how we are trying to rearrange the variables. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen? Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, ma'am. Not in slideshow.
Yeah,
Yes.
I've done slideshow. Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So I won't get into definitions. Okay, but the critical thing that I do want to understand, I want everybody to understand, like any other exercise or any other subject, the issue out here, it has to be, when you talk about research, it has to be organized, it is systematic, right? There is a process, right? You cannot have something which is like do whatever you want. It has to be very systematic. Okay, it is data based, it is needs to be objective, and though of course we say research methodology, we look at it in the social sciences, but it is very much a scientific inquiry. Okay, and the idea is that when we are doing research, the idea is that we find some answers or solutions. Okay, now there are different, let's say, types of research, right? So I think you have already gone through a systematic research process where you have already gone through what is a systematic review. Okay, now research in terms of its like the way you can sort of describe it, it can either be it's logical, you can either do an induction or a deduction approach. Okay, so an induction approach is typically you collect data, and on the basis of that data that you collect, then you develop a theory or a concept. Okay, whereas in a deductive research, okay, you let's say identify a hypothesis and a theory. Okay, or whatever, a generalization, and then you kind of collect data and then you test it. So for example, if I say that smoking in women causes low birth weight in babies. Okay, so I have started with a hypothesis, then obviously I will go and collect data which kind of either proves it or disproves it. Or if I say that smoking for a long duration of time, you will probably have more incidence of lung cancer, right? So people who smoke versus those who do not smoke are more likely to end up with lung cancer. Okay, so that is, I have an hypothesis, then I basically collect data and then I sort of prove it or disprove it. Now when I say empirical research, now there is something which is called, like, you can have a case study research, but when I say empirical, then it's based on evidence, which means that I have to collect certain evidence. Now that evidence can be either qualitative or it can be quantitative, but it has to be based on some evidence that is rigorously tested. Okay. Now, when I say reductive, okay, reductive basically means that, if I have done something, okay, it is something that is, I am not repeating something. Okay, it is something that is there. It's not as if that once I do something, okay, I kind of repeat the thing that somebody else has also done. Okay, so you need to ensure that it is not reductive. And the second thing is that if I have its reproducibility or replicable is, especially in terms of methodology, that if I have used some data and I have got some results, let's say somebody else also does the same thing, should get the same results as I have done. So that is what is called a reproducibility or replicable. Okay, so these are some of the characteristics of research, and it can be any one of this. Okay, these are some of the kind of the different kinds of research that you have. Now then there is something which is called quantitative and qualitative. Now quantitative and qualitative is more in terms of, let's say, the methods that we are using. Okay, now let's say I want to know what is the average number of people who are likely to develop hypertension if they do not exercise. Okay, now if I want to know the average, now that is a quantitative answer. Okay, that is called quantitative research. So in quantitative research is more in terms of what happened, right, what will happen, right, if I do this, will this happen. Okay, and that is, you use probability. Whereas qualitative research is more like, really understanding why this has happened. Okay, I am not saying that, qualitative process is not logical. It is very much logical, but it is more in terms of a description of what led to the other, and it is more process. It is more, it can be sociological, it can be anthropological, it can be historical, right? And it deals with, human, their events, their situation, their habits, their eccentricities, their nature. So the idea is qualitative research is a deep dive into what really occurs between one phenomenon trying to make a relationship between the other, right? For example, let's say I have done an intervention which is that, okay, certain women, uh, if I have given them a financial literacy program, and some women get better with their, they are much better with managing their money, and some women, let's say, do not, manage their money, right? And both have been given the same kind of intervention, but the results of these women kind of differ. Then it is a question of going to the women and then asking them that, okay, what is the reason why you were given this particular program? Why did you not end up, trying to manage your money in a much better manner? Okay, so therefore, that is qualitative, right? So similar, like you might be prescribing medicines for different classes of people. Some people do really well, they really heal fast. Some people do not heal fast, right? So then it is a question of asking is, what has been their medicine regimen? Why did some people, do well, they healed faster, and some people did not heal faster? Then it is a question of again asking them and really, figuring out why that has happened. Okay, so that is qualitative. Okay, now when I say hallmarks of good research, okay, now when I say, I mean, these are some of the qualities that we generally say that, okay, if I say that I have done a decent research, then these are some of the qualities that I need. Okay, so when I say purposelessness, I need to formulate a clear research problem and a research hypothesis, right? So what is the purpose of my research? That should be very clearly defined. It needs to have methodological rigor, which means that whatever methods that I'm using, the sampling criteria, the data, whether the data was enough, okay, whether I am able to test it, okay, whether it you can, if you repeat the data in terms of, if somebody else does it, is it testable? Can somebody replicate the same? If you do the same steps and use the same data, will the results be replicated? Precision is, getting accuracy, and confidence is that the range does not vary, right? Within a 5% or a 95% confidence level, you say that yes, I am sure that these results will hold true. Objectivity on the other hand is that, when you are doing qualitative, yes, the objectivity may be less, but quantitative, right, it's totally objective because it is data. Whatever the results come, you need to be objective about it. But even in terms of qualitative, I would say that when you are doing or asking these questions, the investigator should not let their personal biases uh, affect the process of asking questions. He or she should be honest in terms of asking the questions and recording it, but should not let personal biases dictate what the respondent is going to answer. So objectivity is again very, very important. Generalizability, so we have something called internal validity and external validity. uh, Sometimes when we do a research, okay, some of the results I can say that I can generalize to the entire set of population. Okay, so for example, I was talking about this study of, let's say, the relationship of exercise and, let's say, good immunity. Okay, now suppose they have been decent studies, rigorous studies, and I can say that, okay, if a person exercises generally and on a regular basis, okay, he or she's immunity is likely to be good. Okay, now this is somewhat generalizable. Okay, but if you say something in terms of, let's say, the immunity of, uh, let's say, South Indians versus North Indians because of their food habits, then it is not generalizable. Okay, because the demographic characteristics differ, and just because you have got a results does not mean that the set of population. You try and use only those optimum variables which give you the maximum results, right? So you can collect a lot of data on a lot of variables, but the idea is that use only those set of variables which give maximum explanation for your results. Okay, so I'll just stop for a while. Okay, is there any questions? Any particular questions?
What is the difference between internal and external validity?
Okay, so in an internal validity, it is applicable to the only to the particular area or particular population. Okay, but it is not generalizable to, let's say, the entire universe. Okay, so for example, I have done a study on, um, I have done a study on, let's say, de-addiction of truck drivers. Okay, now I have got some results. Okay, and I have said that, okay, I did a de-addiction program on truck drivers, and I realized that, okay, if I do a de-addiction program on truck drivers, I have got good results. Now therefore, if I do a de-addiction program for other sets of population, I will also get good results. Not necessarily, right? I can obviously, because the nature of the population is different, I cannot generalize this result. Whereas when we say that, okay, smoking among women causes low birth weight in children, okay, this is somewhat a generalizable result, because if you have carried out studies across the universe, okay, and you have found women smoking, and you have found that across all studies, right, women who smoke generally will have low birth weight babies. Okay, that is something which is sort of generalizable. Okay, and that has external validity. Okay, so the results of a study are applicable to other populations also, is when it is the validity is external. And if it is only valid for a certain section of a population or an area or a geographical area, then it is something called internal validity. Is that, does that work?
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Now let's get to the research process. Of course, it is written business research process, but it doesn't really matter. Okay. The research process, whether you do it for a social science research or a business research purposes or for a medical research, broadly, it is going to be the same set of steps are going to be the same. Okay. So the first thing that you will do is you identify your area of research. Okay. So let's take a particular example from you. Anybody would like to talk about any particular study that you are doing, and let's take that as an example. Anybody would like to share? Okay, let's talk about, let's say, impact of palliative care on quality of life at end of life, at the end of, in case of a terminal disease, I mean when the person is at the end of the life. Okay, let's talk about this. Okay, now this is my broad area of research. Okay, now if I were to do this, okay, what is the kind of data that I would collect? Okay, what is the kind of literature that I would collect? Okay, yeah.
So,
If I were to do this, okay, and let's talk about, let's say, how does palliative care improve quality of life during a person's terminal disease? Okay, so what is the data that I would do? How would I go about it?
We'll study the interventions that are used
Okay,
in end of life, different types of interventions. So I have to focus
okay,
on
okay.
find out.
But what is the key out here? I am saying that impact of palliative care on quality of life.
Systematic review. Systematic review, no?
Okay, systematic review. Okay, so when you do systematic review, what is it that you do?
We'll search for existing literature,
Absolutely.
whether what is the literature available, whether if there are already systematic reviews, whether there are RCTs, like to what level the evidence is there.
for
So
the
we'll
under
check
the
that.
shelf baskets we have as well.
I didn't get. Can you repeat your?
So we will check what is the level
Okay.
of evidence available till now.
Okay.
Like if
Okay.
there were
Now,
already
great. Okay, so you have checked evidence. You have checked RCT. Okay. Now let's say that if your topic of research was, I can't hear you, Nadeem ji. Your voice is not clear.
There you go.
Okay. So now what if I said that one, of course, you said impact of this. Now, suppose you were doing this study in, let's say, a particular section of the population. Okay. And you were doing it, let's say, okay, Shavini, what city do you come from?
Vizag.
Okay. So let's say you want to do this in let's say in a particular block of Vizag. Now, what is number one? You've already done the literature review. Now, what is it that, what kind of data would you collect?
Identify a sample of people who are in end of life.
Okay, so you collect sample, but again, what is the variables that you would collect? And I'm saying you don't have to give me all the variables, but let's say you give me let's say, some examples of the variables that you would like to get.
We'll have to apply like quality of life scales.
Absolutely.
And like maybe number, I mean,
the age group,
maybe, yeah.
gender.
You will probably collect demographic variables, okay, maybe age, okay, gender, okay. You may look at the kind of disease, the stage of disease, right? And then
Yes,
you
ma'am.
would look for some quality of life construct. Okay, it is not a single score. You would look at some quality of life construct. Okay, so therefore then the comes, once the process is basically, you would do some literature review, you would look at other studies, okay, and see the kind of methods that are used, the kind of data that is used, the quality of life scales, the other variables that possibly can be used to kind of compute that, right? What other studies have done, and then subject to your, then you would probably identify those variables which you would need data to be collected. Okay, okay, okay. So here I am come to the same. Okay, so this is data gathering, okay, literature review, problem definition. Okay, so I have identified what is my problem. Okay, then variables clearly identified and labeled. Okay, so I have had to, first I have done my literature review, I may have interviewed some people, then I have clearly identified that I want to study whether or not palliative care at the end of life actually improves quality of life, and I have identified the variables. Now the question is, second thing is, the fifth is generation of hypothesis. Okay, now one hypothesis can be that palliative care at the end of life improves quality of life. That is one way of stating a hypothesis, okay, whereby I have made a statement. I am saying that I have to prove that, okay, I have, this is a conjectural statement that palliative care improves the quality of life in end of life patients. Okay, now it is up to me to collect the data and either accept the hypothesis or to reject the hypothesis. Okay, now for this hypothesis, now to prove what this hypothesis, I will have to choose a research design. Now it can be, either it can be like, an experimental study, whereas some people were given palliative care, some people were not given palliative care. Okay, how do you prove that palliative care improves quality of life? Which means you will have to compare, there will be a experimental group and there will be a control group. Okay, and do that, or it could be some other research design specific to that study, whereby you say that, okay, this is how I am going to organize my study. Once you have done that organization, then the question comes in terms of collecting the data and the interpretation. Okay, and when you interpret the data, obviously you will run some analysis. On that basis, you will actually either accept your hypothesis or reject your hypothesis. Okay, and then the rest of the stuff comes, report, or you're writing your paper or whatever it is comes later. But from 1 to 8 is what a typical research study needs to, or a research process needs to look like. Okay, so it is, okay, it is observation, identification of a problem area, okay, then hypothesis. Now here I am going to down to constructs. Okay, now for example, when I say quality of life, okay, now how do you define quality of life? Okay, or how do you define a patient is sick? How do you identify that a child is underweight? How do you identify that a person is obese? Right? Anybody? How do you identify that a person is obese?
Based on existing grading systems or
Okay.
Checking the BMR.
Exactly. Right. So I have a precisely, good definition of, a person that, okay, not just because his weight is 60 or 70 does not mean, a person 70 is obese and a person who is 60 is not obese. Okay. There is obviously a construct which I have, defined in terms of, let's say, age, weight and height, which determines, and maybe even the gender, which basically defines the BMI. Okay. Similarly, I say the child is underweight. Okay. Now I may have a child which is, let's say, a 3-year-old child which is, let's say, 6 kilos in India, and a child which is, 6 years old in the United States, and that is 8 kilo, and that child is 8 kilos. Now, on the basis of that, can I say that the Indian child is underweight?
no, because
You're
the
taking
normal
100%.
distribution is different in both the
Absolutely. Right. So therefore, the construct of an underweight child is going to differ from that of a American child. Right. So therefore, this aspect also needs to be taken into account, the contextual factors, whenever I operationalize something. Right. So if you are dealing, let's say, trying to serve a menu in a hospital, okay, and in a let's say in India and, US, okay, the food is going to look like really different in terms of calories, right? Because you have a different demographic, profile. I'm not a, doctor, but, having linked among doctors, I kind of do this. Okay. So so I will come on to, let me just come on to that construct part of it, and then I'll go back. Okay. So this is what I meant to say by a construct. Okay, one sec. Okay. Now, when I say a construct is based on concepts or thought, can be thought of a conceptual model that has measurable aspect. This allows a researcher to measure the concept and have a common acceptable platform when other researchers do a similar research. Okay. So, for example, I am saying a person is competent. Now, what is the measure of a competence? Right? How do I say the person has got a kidney disease? Or what is it say, like, chronic kidney disease? Okay. So therefore you have 4 or 5 aspects whereby, whereby you say that, okay, based on these 4 or 5 aspects, I will say that, okay, I can certify this patient has got a chronic kidney disease. Right. So similarly, right, for a lot of things, okay, you may measure something in terms of age, height, weight, but, the construct that you create out of them is very different. So similarly, quality of life, okay, is based on certain concepts whereby you say in terms of, the person, how maybe how healthy he feels, how emotionally he's stable, how happy he is in terms about his work. Okay. But if I have the same quality of life for an end of life patient, will that differ? Will that construct differ for a quality of life for a normal individual and for a person in end of life? Does the construct change?
Yes, it changes.
Right. So it is something that you have to identify, and sometimes, as researchers, we may always have something that is already there, but sometimes we may have to even develop it. Right. Sometimes based on our own experience and looking at patients, we kind of identify factors and we try and, create a construct based on some specific questions. And then, of course, obviously you have to test it out, okay, and see whether, that construct is valid. but that is also possible. Okay, so sometimes you have construct like a BMI, which is already available, tested, malnutrition, which is always tested, a chronic kidney disease, which is, right, or concept of in terms of total pain, maybe you have already those measures. But sometimes in some cases, when you are dealing with your, regular patients, you may be looking at something and you may want to actually form a construct. Okay, is that clear to everybody? Would anybody like to give me an example of a construct where you are dealing with a patient and you've looked at a lot of patients and you may want to create a construct? Anybody would like to give me an example from your own experience? Anything that comes?
Using Braden scale. Using Braden scale to assess the risk of bed sore.
Okay. Anybody else?
Acceptance of diagnosis, psychological construct.
Okay, great. That's a great one. Okay, anybody would like to, suggest a hypothesis till whatever we've done till now?
Total pain is something which we usually say, but I do not think there is some scales to measure the total pain. Even though we say it has various
Dr.
dimensions.
Sunil, your voice is not very clear.
Okay. So total pain.
Okay.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, total pain you said, right?
Yeah. Total pain is something which we usually say, which has various dimensions. But I do
Okay.
not think there is something which measures total pain. How to measure total pain? So that we
Okay.
need to consider.
So I have some scales that I'm going to, show you at the end of this presentation. Okay. Which I'm happy to, show you that, I've used various scales. Of course, I've used it in the context of scale, but there are various measures of how you can measure pain. Okay, and many different people have use different measures. Okay, so I'm going to take you to that also. Okay, let me just right. Any other question? Anybody would like to talk about a hypothesis that they have in their mind, which is brewing in their mind?
Hypothesis that palliative care does improve the quality of life of patients.
Okay. Anything else?
Discussion of prognosis can improve quality of life.
Okay, very
can
good one.
impact quality.
Right. Okay. Anything about delirium in, let's say, ICUs? Anybody would like to frame a hypothesis around that? Delirium among ICU patients?
Using of non-pharmacological measures to prevent delirium.
Okay, great. But everybody is kind of clear with this? Okay, great. Okay, let's go on. Okay. Okay. Okay, this is basically the kinds of research design. Okay. Now, experimental research is basically something like, pre-test, post-test, pre-test, control group, exposed group, post-test, control group, exposed group, right? Similarly, descriptive research, case study, survey based. Survey again can be like cross sectional, longitudinal, right? Cross sectional is at a particular point of time. Longitudinal is like, for example, you study the same subjects, over a period of time, right? So if you, let's say, take, um, you know, uh, you take a sample of people, okay, and you kind of want to test longevity okay, factors responsible for longevity. So you recruit the participants at, let's say, when they were like 18 years of age, okay, and you keep studying them over a period of year. Of course, there will be data attrition, and then you keep on identifying various aspects and see what factors have contributed to longevity, right? Similarly, you have analytical research, as I said, systematic, philosophical, historical, meta-analysis. Reviews are basically part of meta-analysis. So these are different other kinds of research design. But normally, for the most part of it, what we do is either meta-analysis or systematic research, some of these case studies and surveys. And when we talk about research design, then is basically pre-test and some of these statistical designs, which we'll also study at some point of time. Okay. Now, what is a variable? Okay. Now, variable is something that differs either in kind or in degree. Okay. And variables can be defined in various ways. So either you can define it as independent or dependent variables. Okay. So now if I say, going back to the same hypothesis, that palliative care can improve the quality of life, okay, or improves the quality of life, which is going to be dependent and which is going to be independent?
Quality of life is dependent variable.
And palliative care is the independent variable, right? So independent variable is the one variable which comes first. Based on the variable, then the dependent variable is dependent on the independent variable, right? So the quality of life should be dependent on the quality of palliative care that you give, or the quantum of palliative care that you give. Discrete and continuous. So for example, if I say, okay, let's say I categorize, okay, for example, I say male, female, or categories of hypertension. Okay, so some people may be highly hypertensive, some people may be less hypertensive. Or I say, non-diabetic, pre-diabetic, and diabetic. Okay, so these are categories, these are discrete. Whereas continuous variables are like age, weight. Okay, those are continuous. Or even for that matter, let's say hemoglobin. Okay, those are continuous. You can convert a continuous variable into a discrete variable. For example, I may decide to categorize a continuous variable into categories. Like, say, example, age 18 to 25, 25 to 35, 35 to 45. Now here what I have done is converted a continuous variable into a discrete variable. Okay, intervening variables are the ones that interfere between an independent and dependent variables, because, for example, right, which you say that for this to happen, okay, this variable has to happen, right? Until unless this particular that variable does not happen, the relationship between x and y will not happen. So there is another intervening variable that also is responsible for the result between x and y. Okay, moderating variable, on the other hand, is something which improves, or which creates a difference in the intensity of the impact, or the dependent variable. Okay, so based on that variable, so it could be in terms of the let's say treatment. For example, if you are saying palliative care, okay, so let's say it can be in terms of the intensity of the palliative care. Okay, that is something called a moderating variable. Extraneous variables are those variables which are basically, they are there in your model but do not contribute anything to the model. So the idea is to always get rid of extraneous variables. Okay, so intervening variables are those which need to be there before the relationship between x and y, okay, is going to happen. Whereas moderating variables affect the intensity of the relationship between x and y. Okay, so that is in terms of variables. So this we've done. Okay, we've already done experimental. Okay, so one ex post facto is I have already got data. Okay, and on the basis of whatever is data that has been collected, I basically do my research. For example, we have this DHS data as population surveys. Okay, the family health surveys. There is Data has been collected, it's historical data. I kind of systematically manipulate it and I kind of do it. Whereas some of the research that mostly doctors do is more like experimental, like for example, drug efficacy, right? So somebody is given the drug and somebody is not given the drug, like, placebo, right? So for example, if you were doing vaccination testing, okay, so whether the vaccination worked or not worked. So some people you gave the vaccination and some people was given a placebo, and then you kind of said that whether or not those organisms kind of worked or not, and whether the immunity kind of cells kicked in into it. So that is experimental, right? Cross section, as I said, is at a particular point of time, whereas longitudinal is the same sample over a period of time. Okay, univariate and multivariate research is, for example, I say price and demand. Okay, so if I say that if the price goes up, the demand of a product comes down. Okay, so if I say I increase the price of a stent, okay, whether or not people who will opt to get a stent, thing will kind of will it get affected, or if more people are likely to get insurance, okay, the bill hospital on an average hospital bills will increase. Okay, now you've only taken two variables. Whereas in multivariate research, you are not just taking two variables, you may be taking more than two variables. Okay, so you can have many independent variables and one dependent variables. Okay, sometimes you may have, it's not the norm, but sometimes you may have more than one dependent variable also, but those research designs are different. But in this case, for the most part of it, you may have many independent variables in a multivariate research, and in a univariate, there is only one relationship. There is only one independent and one dependent variables. Okay, but in a multivariate, you can have both, two or more variables on the both independent or dependent. Okay, so you have situations where you have possibility of many dependent variables. Okay, literature review, we won't do it. Okay, we'll forget about this. Okay, hypothesis. Now we've already studied this. Okay, it's a conjectural statement on the relationship of two or more variables chosen for one's research study. It is to be noted that the hypothesis is singular, while for plural, the spelling is hypothesis. Okay, now extrinsic motivation will be significantly related to academic performance of students. Okay, cigarette smoking will produce a significant impact on concentration, learning, short-term memory, short-term and long-term memory. Okay, right? Students or children spending too much time on the mobile will have concentration issues, will have low concentration, right? Now that is a particular statement. Now when you are saying a particular statement, right, now the idea is for you to either prove it or not prove it. So the first statement that you say, it is called a null hypothesis. Okay, so either you can accept the null hypothesis or you can reject the null hypothesis. So for example, if I had to write the null and the alternate hypothesis looking at this, the null hypothesis will be cigarette smoking will produce a significant impact on concentration, learning, short-term memory and long-term memory. The alternate hypothesis is cigarette smoking will not produce a significant impact on concentration, learning, short-term and long-term memory. Okay, but when we analyze our results, we normally say that either accept the null hypothesis or reject the null hypothesis. Okay, that is the way we normally say our results. Okay, any questions till now? Everybody okay?
Can you speak about the null hypothesis again?
You want me to speak about the null hypothesis?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you can take any hypothesis. A hypothesis is a statement that you want to prove or disprove. Okay. See, I can take this also as a null hypothesis. Cigarette smoking will not affect short-term memory. I can take that as a null hypothesis. Even that is perfectly fine. It is depends on you how you want to frame it. Okay, so it is typical written as H0. Okay, cigarette smoking will not produce short-term memory loss. Okay, and my alternate hypothesis is H1. Cigarette smoking will produce short-term memory loss. right? So here you have created or formulated a statement whereby you have to prove through your analysis whether this statement is correct or not correct. Okay, when I say, now what is the difference between a research problem and a hypothesis? Okay, now a research problem is that, okay, you generally find, okay, that those who people who smoke, generally one finds that, you know, there is a short term memory loss, there is a, you know, concentration issues. Okay, they may be suffering from long term memory loss. Okay, so this is a research problem which you have identified. But whether or not actually cigarette smoking leads to short term or long term memory loss is now you have to prove and disprove it. So hypothesis is a very refined statement of what you want to prove or disprove, right? Because now all your analysis is totally devoted to the fact whether you want to accept this hypothesis or you want to reject it, right? And that hypothesis can be accepted either using quantitative research or qualitative research, right?
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yeah.
Like, why do we have to have a null hypothesis? Like, why don't we just have one hypothesis and prove or either disprove it? But why do we have to write like null hypothesis?
I think it is just to make it a little bit more clear. Okay, otherwise, if I don't write it, it is very difficult for me to organize my research. If I don't write a statement, I will not be able to correct, sort of either, you know, collect literature or, you know, identify variables or do my sampling until unless I have, you know, identified my hypothesis. Okay, now let's say, okay, I'm going to do a slightly variation. There is higher degree of memory loss. Okay, there is higher degree of depression among male populations who retire at the age of 60. Okay, I'm repeating. There is a higher degree of incidence of depression, okay, among male populations who retire before the age of 60. Okay, now when I put this hypothesis, now what data are you going to collect?
Demographic variables and depression, the severity
Depression,
of
okay, demographic. Now when I say at the age of 60, okay, now you will obviously have to also collect data for those who retired at 50, 60, 70, 80, maybe. Okay, then you will also have to collect data on female women who retired at 50, 60, 70. Okay, and when you say retire, it means you are not looking at non-working population. Okay, so when I actually state a hypothesis very clearly and identify it, it is far easier for me to identify what is it I'm going to study. That is why a hypothesis statement is very important, because it kind of pinpoints. It's like, you know, I've hit the, you know, target. I've identified the target, what I want to do. So this is my target statement of research. Right, so therefore hypothesis generation is a very important step that you kind of do, right? I do not know whether in research papers you explicitly write the hypothesis or not. You may, but when you are doing your research, you definitely need a hypothesis statement, because that kind of helps you to organize it. Is everybody okay with this? I hope nobody is sleeping.
It's a framework for your research.
Yes. We still have half an hour. I'm happy to go up till later, but everybody has to be agreed with it.
If
Okay.
research
Yeah.
problem and hypothesis are the same or different?
Dr. Sunil, your voice is not clear.
Uh, are the research problem and hypothesis are those same or different?
No, it is a hypothesis will be derived from a research problem.
Okay. So you just
First, you will
talked about
identify your research problem. Okay, that there is a problem, and your hypothesis will flow from your research problem.
so just now you talked about the hypothesis about the incidence of depression among males who retired at the age of 60. So what would be the research problem? Just for to understand.
So when you were kind of doing literature, and let's say you were kind of studying depression and stuff, and you realize that you say that people should start working because you find that people generally that there seems to be a higher incidence of depression among people who do not work. Okay, and let's say you were like want to see whether you want to look at an intervention, whether you would like to purposefully occupy older generation people in second jobs or second careers, or organize them, give them some games or board games, or organize them into community activities or some social activities to reduce the incidence of depression. Okay, but you realize that there is a problem and you want to do an intervention, but you really have to prove that okay, whether or not this holds true or not. Okay, so therefore, okay, this was a research problem, and here in this case now specifically you are carrying out that research or writing a hypothesis. Now this is what you want to prove, or you don't want to say that okay, you want to conclusively state that yes, if male population who retire before 60 are definitely prone to higher incidence of depression, which means you have to find the incidence of depression among other sections of the population, and then you have to conclusively find out that in this category you have a higher incidence of depression, right? So you have to purposefully prove this, right? So a hypothesis, a research problem is something that you discuss, whereas a hypothesis is something that you have to conclusively prove through your data analysis that yes, this is true or this is not true, right? Of course we don't say true and not true, we say accept and reject. Okay, we never say accept or we never say true or not true, we always say in research accept or reject, right? Because we are trying to arrive at a version of a truth, but we can never say conclusively that this is the truth.
So, madam, in research, is it always necessary that we should have a hypothesis? For example, if you are researching on, say, the effect of a drug on atherosclerosis.
Okay.
I mean, it's just like a new drug. So
okay.
we have.
Okay. So now you want to let's say do this effect of a drug on this. Okay. Yeah. Now, if you were doing this effect of a drug on this, okay, now you can already you can put this, the effect of X drug will cause a 50% reduction in the incidence of this disease. Okay. Or the use of this disease will cause the duration of the disease to come down by 5 days.
No, what I meant to say is it always necessary that we have to have a quantitative, level to cut off and say that this is true?
It is a good idea to do it because it sort of organizes it. Okay. Because at the some end of the mind, you want to know what is it going to happen. Okay. Of course, you want to, you can generally do some research and you can figure out something. Okay. And something comes out. But if you are, really trying to do something, for example, as in this case of drug, you want to really see whether this drug is effective and you define the effectiveness parameters. right?
So
It's like a
whether
goal.
it's like statistically still significant or not.
Yes. Right. So it is like a goal. Okay,
Goal,
that
yes.
okay, 10,000 steps of walking in that sense. Okay,
Right.
so it's helpful. Okay, there may be cases where you may not need a hypothesis, you may be just doing some sort of descriptive analysis, you don't need a hypothesis. But if you are trying to test something and you are trying to say that some kind of intervention, then yes, you would definitely like to have a hypothesis, right? And I am sure you would be doing, I think while we are going through this class also, I think at the back of your mind you must be thinking of a lot of situations where you would want to put things in very clear forms. Yes, absolutely, Dr. Jagrati. Right? I'm sure at the back of your mind something must be going on, and trying to see that, okay, fine, if I do this method, or if I do this treatment, okay, and if I carry this exercise among x number of patients, it should possibly have this outcome. Okay, and by what percentage I can reduce it, or improve quality of life, or healing, or whatever it is, or recovery, I don't know, right? But something must be definitely in everybody's mind, must be going. Okay. Okay, now here is something called sampling. Okay, now obviously I cannot ever do the universe. Okay, I have to basically collect a sample from the population, and the idea is to have a sample which is a representative of that particular population. Okay, now there are two methods of sampling. One is called probability sampling methods. Okay, which is basically you give each and every observation a chance of being included in the sample, whereas non-probability can be something like judgmental, convenience, or purposive, right? So these are snowballing, right? These are non-probability sampling methods where you don't give possibility of every person to be included. It's not a random method that you do. Okay, there can be various methods for data collection, which we'll try and discuss later on as we have time. Okay, observation. Okay, so when you actually go to a patient, okay, you observe the patient. Okay, and when you observe the patient, you look at whether the patient is is his attention levels, right? Is he woozy, is he not woozy, right? Whether he can answer your questions, right? So you've given the person anesthesia, and after that you kind of check whether the person is is responding, he can answer your questions. Okay, similarly when you give anesthesia, okay, then also you ask certain questions. So that is observation. Okay, you can interview when you specifically, which is highly used in social science methods, where we actually interview and ask them explicitly for answers. Okay, then there are performance tests or a battery of tests. So for example, you make a person go through a exercise cycle, you kind of do those stress tests. Okay, so you do those performance tests, or you have an emotional IQ test where you ask people to do test. You recognize color. Okay, eyesight. Okay, persons reads out something, and then those are battery of tests, and those are inventories, or questionnaires which person can self fill. Okay, and there is a checklist. You go to a place and say, oh, you go to a hospital, you say, okay, fine, whether this this facility is well run or not. Okay, so you check, okay, these machines are there, this is there, okay, uniforms are there, the cleanliness is there, I don't know, whatever. So that is a checklist, and again you have to define what is it that you want to check. So even those are methods of data collection. Okay, I will come back to normality and homogeneity later on. Okay, let's look at right. So these are sampling techniques. This is probability, simple random sampling, systematic, stratified. Now most of these samples are used in social science samples. Okay, but anybody has any idea of random sampling? Is anybody any idea?
Pick the subjects randomly.
What is random sampling? What is random?
Haphazard.
Okay, okay. Great answer. Okay, let's do a need assessment for palliative care across 5 districts. Okay, how do we go about it? I want to do a need assessment of palliative care among 5 districts of Andhra Pradesh. I can't obviously collect data from all 5 districts, right?
We can go with the cancer OPD settings or in hospital setting.
Okay, fine. Now you can go to the cancer, but when you're talking about palliative care, is it only cancer?
Only yes.
No.
I mean, normally we talk about palliative care in terms of only oncology, but right? And then again, what hospitals? Big size hospitals, small size hospitals, nursing homes, right? Urban areas, rural areas, right? So, for example, he said cluster samples with cancer hospitals as sampling units. So he's looked at only cancer, right? But then you have left out non-cancer. I mean, other diseases you have left out. So either you are saying that you are sampling, either you say that, okay, you are looking at palliative care, need of palliative care for cancer patients in 4 districts of Andhra Pradesh. Okay. Now, obviously, you say hospitals. Now, first, you will have to make a list of hospitals. Okay. So, you will need to collect all these 4 districts and you will have various hospitals. Okay. Now, when you make a list of hospitals, then like you generate a random number, and on the random number last 2 digits, okay, I make a list of all the hospitals. Okay, let's say the random numbers comes 26. So you take the 26th number on the list. Then the next random number comes as 56. Okay, so I've taken 56, the 56th hospital in the list. Now that is random number because here I have given each and every list of in the list of hospitals, I have given each and every hospital a chance of being included in the sample. Okay. Now let us come to stratified sampling. Okay, random sampling is great. Okay. Now, what if I had to say that I want to be ensuring that I take, they may be bigger hospitals, okay, these corporate hospitals, or I may be taking smaller hospitals also. So in that case, I divide hospitals into various strata, big hospitals, medium-sized hospitals, nursing homes. And then on that list, then I do a random sampling of within those strata, then I kind of do the samples. Now, this is to ensure that I have taken every type of hospital into play. Okay, so I have divided to strata and then I have divided. Right? Now, if I do something like cluster sampling, okay, now let's say if you were having, okay, besides this, let's say there are some districts, within some districts, there may be some blocks which are more closer to areas which have, let's say, factories, okay, polluting factories. Okay, then you may want to divide, hospitals which are near to those clusters which have, industries which are polluting industries, and those which are not there in polluting industries. I'm just getting example. Now there you try and divide the area into clusters and then take the sample, that is cluster sampling. Right? Now I want everybody to just close your eyes for a 5 seconds and try and see how you would use it for your patients. how would you sample for a particular situation in your patients? Anybody wanting to do some patients into strata? Okay, let's say liver disease. Okay, let me give you a sort of a cue. Liver disease. Is there a strata involved? What would be the strata?
Acute or chronic liver diseases.
Okay.
Alcoholic and non-alcoholic.
Okay. Can it be low income, high income? Right? Can it be alcohol related, non-alcoholic related?
Yes. Can.
Various stages of liver diseases.
Absolutely. Even that is possible, yes. So for example, if I wanted to do quality of life for liver disease, and you would want to look at various stages of liver disease and then do the quality of life, yes.
Incidence of hepatitis in these people.
Absolutely. The idea is that whatever we are doing, we need to palliative care in different settings. Absolutely. Bang on.
Access to nearby hospitals or not?
But what is the strata?
Strata is whether access depends on
Okay.
access.
Okay, so you said nearer to hospital, not so near, and let's say, okay, fine, yes. Right, so you can define it in various ways, but you need to start looking at it in that terms. Now let's say I do want to do clusters. Okay, so I can do an area cluster, like heavily densely populated, medium density population, low density population, right? So palliative care, community health care, community palliative care in different densely populated, different density populations. I don't know whether that makes sense, but yes. Palliative care in urban and rural, yes. But I think as long as everybody has got it, I think it's great. Right? If everybody's mind has started thinking, then it works. Okay. Okay. So let's go on to this. Okay. So when I look at population, okay. So when I do sampling, now these are a couple of things that, these are definitions that we need to understand. Okay. In the expression of research result, the large group of interest to a researcher is called a population, right? So when we were talking about depression and people who retire early, so in our case, the population was people who retired, and obviously retired, it had to be retired, and those who were working earlier. So my population consisted of that. If I was looking in terms of a specific area, then yes, I would kind of do that. Okay, so let's say my population would be, let's say, let's say Calicut area. Okay, depression among senior citizens in Calicut area. Then I would look at that particular thing, and that would be my population. Okay, now And the size of the population may be very large or very small, but the people who participate in the study is called a sampler. Sampling is the process of selecting those samples, right? So for example, I said random sampling, non-random sampling. So that is the process, okay? And if the sample represents the characteristics of the population, then it is called a representative sample. So what we must do is to be able to generalize to the population, we must collect a representative sample, okay? So the target population is the collection of elements or objects that possess the information sought by the researcher and about which inferences are to be made. It is also known as the universe and refers to the population of interest. The target population should be defined in terms of elements, sampling units, extent, and time. Never mind, we can leave out this last line, but let's just understand that this is known as a universe and refers to the population of interest, okay? The element is the object, okay? Now the element can be a household, can be an individual, can be anything which is the object of interest, okay? So if I was looking at households, my household would be my object of interest. If I was looking at, let's say architecture of a particular city, then buildings would be my object of interest, okay? So it depends what is my observation, what is the object of my interest, okay? A sampling unit is the element or unit containing that element, okay? So when I divide it into various, for example, I divide it into various strata, so that is my sampling unit, okay? So from that sampling unit, okay, I will sample the, right? So for example, if I want to, let's say, I have a bag, okay, and from the bag I need to collect some coins. So that bag is my sampling unit, and from that thing, let's say there are many kinds of coins in it, 5 rupees coin, 10 rupees coin, 2 rupees coin, or whatever, right? That is my sampling unit, okay? Extent, of course, refers to geographical boundaries, and time is the time period under consideration. So whenever we are doing sampling, we have to understand that, okay, it is subject to a geographical boundary and it is subject to time, because anytime nothing is constant in life, okay? So it also depends at the time at which you are doing things, okay? So time is also of major interest, okay? Now let's say sampling frame, okay? Now okay, let's look at okay, for example, I want to look at people who understand how to use WhatsApp, okay? Or I want to use people who can use social media effectively, okay? And I do a web-based survey, okay? And I'm asking is whether people are able to use social media effectively or not, and I do a web-based survey which I float on, let's say, Facebook. Is there something wrong in this?
Selection bias. I mean, the way.
Yes, absolutely correct. Absolutely correct, right? Because if I want to know whether people can use social media effectively, I am floating it on Facebook, so only those people who can use Facebook will be part of this. So what I have done in my sampling frame, I have left out those people who do not use social using. So my sampling frame is incorrect. I have to make sure that, and this is the same example when you said palliative care, right? So when I said palliative care, immediately we said oncology, which means I only looked at those hospitals which are, I have not looked at other hospitals which may also need palliative care. For example, people die of not just cancer, they may die of everything, right? congestive heart failure, kidney disease, liver disease, pancreatic, whatever, and it may not be cancer. So if I am doing need-based assessment of palliative care and I only study oncology, hospitals or oncology patients or cancer patients, my sampling frame is incorrect. Right? I have not taken, right? So therefore there is a sampling error, because if I have taken only those units, that means I have done a sampling error. Everybody's got this? Fine. Okay. So I have 10 minutes more. I know everything is very tight. I will just take you through. We'll do this rest of it later on. I am just going to, for your purposes, I am just going to do something on. I will tell you the scales later, but I just wanted to share. Okay. These are pain scales. Can you see this? I can, because somebody asked me this question, so therefore I'm just kind of doing it. These are pain scales. Okay, this is one kind of a pain scale where you have asked a person, okay, over age 9, okay, where you ask from a person from 1 to 10, how much pain you are feeling. Okay, this is for children. Okay, you want to ask children, okay, and you want to see, okay, so this is, it can be used in adults and children over age 3, where the child is able to tell me, and they tell me that, okay, which face looks like, and can I kind of correlate to the face and say that, okay, right, which face would you select. Okay, so this is the Wong-Baker faces pain scale. This is a pain scale whereby you don't ask the patient at all. It is basically in terms of FLACC, which is facial expression, leg tension or relaxation, activity, crying, consolability. Okay, so here date and time, again it is subject to date and time. Okay, 0, 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 10. So now you go there, okay, and then you kind of say this, and then based on this, right, you kind of rate the person in terms of pain. Okay, so if you kind of record this score on a regular basis, then you can get a sense of whether somebody's pain is increasing, decreasing, or staying the same. Of course, I had done this on the basis of some scales which I will do it, but since somebody asked, okay, this is for a child, right? So crying requires oxygen, increased vital signs, expression, sleepless. This is for a child. For baby 6 months and younger, it is used in neonatal intensive care units. Okay, again, as I said, the construct is different. Okay, this is for this is a comfort pain scale. Okay, again, they've used, these are the it's a pain scale, but these are the sub parts of the pain scale: alertness, calmness, respiratory disease, distress, crying, physical movement, muscle tone, facial tension, blood pressure, and heart rate baseline. Okay, so the pain scale is the construct, but the various parts of that pain scale is this, which goes on to make that pain scale. It was just an example that I kind of gave you. Okay.
Sorry, actually,
Suryaji, I can't hear you.
because
Suryaji, your voice is not clear.
just you have. Oh, so.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah.
So I actually asked that question, and what you have just shown is pain which is physical. So
Yeah.
it can be used only to measure physical construct, but
Absolutely.
total pain is something else.
Total pain is completely different else.
Yeah. So that's why
I was using it, this I was using for only demonstrating scales.
Yeah.
Okay, so I understand total pain is a combination of different things. Right, I'll figure out something there also. I'll do some research.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Arun is smiling. You want to say something?
No, ma'am.
So I know some of the candidates who present here, they know research well, but many of us do not know, and we are newborns in this field. So it will take time to digest, and I think we will ask even silly questions.
So, sir, the older ones are the newborns here.
No, but if you'll have to tell me whether I've pitched it right, I've not pitched it right. I mean, if it's too, difficult or too easy.
Madam, this is the first class. We're just getting the feel of it. We'll tell you.
Okay. Is there anybody which finds it too basic? Please tell me that also.
We are too basic, madam. We have no exposure to research at all. So you have to start with the baby steps with us.
Okay, because right now we are doing theory, but then later on we get on to things like probability distributions, and we go on to hypothesis testing, right? So that becomes a little statistical. Right now I'm still doing simple stuff, right? But is there anybody who wants to who finds it very basic, who has done this before? So it's everybody is okay with it?
Yes, madam.
Okay, no issues.
I think if you can go even maybe even below this level, that would be okay. I think that would be something which many of them would like, and I just want to express it because I told you we are only newborns.
Okay, so we'll try our best. Okay, but only thing is, hypothesis testing is going to be a little difficult, but we'll try.
Yeah, and I think it would be good if you can include some examples that especially if that belongs to palliative care, then I think, or if you want to medical field, then everybody will understand it properly.
Okay, so all the hypothesis testing I will use only something related to medical statistics only, biostatistics only.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, somebody said we have done some work in our thesis long time ago. So do you now remember it? Okay. Great. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you,
So,
okay. So
we'll next week again we'll do stuff, and then we'll go on to measurement and rating scales.
So, sir, one question to you. After all studying all these things, are we supposed to produce a research paper?
So I think the objective of this course was to be able to consume research.
Okay, now I mean for the fellowship, are we supposed to present a research paper or something
no,
like that?
no, you are not.
Okay.
You have to actually come up with some one-page document on research proposal or something like that.
Yeah.
So there are some. Yeah. Okay. You need not do any research because we do not have time to do that.
Yeah, that's why I asked. So we don't have time for that.
But we can always actually do some research. A simple thing. I mean, I can always give you a questionnaire.
Madam,
okay.
I've got a very interesting topic, which is actually quite relevant in our palliative care. Especially what I see on a day-to-day basis is that cancer patients who are towards end of life, or even advanced cancer patients, are always depressed, and that depression is actually looked not at all looked into, and they suffer very, very, very much. So in my hospital, what I have done is I have tried to take the confidence of the oncologists at least, and then I'm asking them to allow me to treat them for depression, along with the
Okay.
social psychologists who we have, and that is actually giving a very good result. So probably we
That is
can.
also there. And actually, if you actually realize, it's one paper I actually read that it was it's very useful to make people play games.
Like,
Board games, crosswords,
but then
right?
again, for advanced cancer patients who are in severe pain, they are not receptive for anything. They are just down the drain. So it's very difficult for us to get them to get into any activity. At least getting their pain relief is the biggest thing for them. So,
Music
but
therapy and art therapy, I
Listening
don't know.
music.
Yes, listening music, art therapy, is I don't know whether how much they can use their hands, but that is another thing.
but I was thinking more in terms of medication therapy rather than
Okay.
because that gives them a lot of relief. In fact, we have tried it, and we have started off with SSRIs, and that had given a lot of relief to a lot of people. Because as Dr. Sunil sir was saying, it's like a total pain. So when they have the depression, that augments their physical pain. So whatever you try to give, like morphine, you keep on stepping it up, but they are not affected by it. So that's when I thought, if we can give the antidepressants that will help them and didn't help them, so we
So
could
why you
reduce.
can actually do a research on this, no?
That's what I'm saying, sir. Madam.
Yeah,
This
you
is
can
an area
actually
of
do a
research
research. But
I would
for
like
the
to do.
purpose of this class, I mean, along with you, I mean, we can all formulate a small questionnaire on, let's say awareness of palliative care.
Correct. That is needed. That is needed.
Right. And I think even if everybody I can, draft something out. And if I, send it up, even if you get like each one gets 10 responses in this class, we'll have a small data set to analyze actually.
Actually, it is needed among doctors. Even doctors don't know what palliative care. Honestly, the
I
other
was
specialists.
thinking of this questionnaire for
They
the
don't refer.
doctors.
Yeah, but the issue is that suppose for this purposes of this class, I was just thinking if you do something and get a data set and kind of start analyzing it, the results, so then we actually learn a lot faster in terms of the various methods, whether we want to use ANOVA or whatever, maybe some things in terms of how to formulate a do some analysis, do some descriptive stuff, do some uh, bar diagrams.
The class will help us a lot in analyzing all this. Thank you so much.
Charlie, let's see how it goes, and we'll figure it out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
So
sir.
Night.
let's wind up the session for today. And for the next 1 week, you read this PPT or the handout which Windy is going to give us. Read it 5 times at least. Then we will understand something. And maybe during the over the next few months, we will be hearing more about the research, statistics and things. And I'm sure we will learn from this.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes.
So I'll send you whatever portion I have done. I'll send you a copy, of that.
okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank
Sripriya,
you.
it's
Thank
over
you.
to you.
Thank you, Dr. Vinti. Thank you, everyone. Even I was skeptical when we were scheduling the classes on Saturdays, late evenings. But once we are kickstarted with the session, I could see Sunil sir becoming the voice of the group literally today. And I could see Jagrati was celebrating his words when he was saying that we should be more basic and all. So that brings about a very positive picture today. And of course, this is going to be the start of a very long journey, I suppose, at least for some of us involved. And thank you everyone for joining in, and we'll be meeting again next Saturday, same time, with more interesting discussions. This is Sripriya, along with Dr. Vinti Agarwal and Dr. Sunil Kumar, signing off from the presentation desk. See you next Saturday. Till then, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Good night.
Good night.